Okay, 3 slide packs today, and then I'm going to the pub, alone or with whoever wants to come with me. So I want to do them in this order, but I can be pretty easily convinced to do it differently. I'm going to start by just walking you through what the exam's gonna look like, sort of, kind of, like, without giving anything very much away at all. Then what I want to do is talk about, I've got a slide pack that I call Around Contract Law in 40 slides. And they're nothing new, they're all slides that you've seen in some other circumstance, but I just thought a little kind of intensive revision pack. And then I've got a quiz slide pack with questions in it to just have a go at, if you want to do that. And as we go, you're going to ask me questions, we're going to talk about where things are at. Now, I'll tell you straight up what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to make you happy by giving you robust feedback on the second assignment because I really haven't marked enough of them to get any real sense of how it's going. I will do nothing else but mark them for the next 2 days. It is not acceptable that you don't have them back yet, but I was just too sick the week before last and I've been in catch-up mode. And grumpy marking with snot is not actually a good thing. But we will get there. What I'm probably likely to do is give a little less feedback than I normally do, which is still will be more feedback than most people give from what I understand. But I will put my telephone number, I make it very obvious. You will talk to me if you're worried, okay? Like, I'm really not that hard to get in touch with. So we'll do that, all right? And yeah, just complain amongst yourselves. Don't come and complain to me about it. I really couldn't do anything about it. So let's talk about the exam. So format for the exam pretty much looks like this. I have already given you some air quotes contract terms. Now, it's actually a term sheet. You can access it in the exam area in Canvas. If you're worried about where it is, when I do the announcement tomorrow, I'll make sure there's a direct link to it so that you have got it. Why has it got, am I saying contract with air quotes about it? It's a document. It is a term sheet, and you've actually just recently done an assignment about a term sheet, so it probably won't surprise you if there is a question in there about whether, once you get a scenario, whether it's a contract at all, because, hey, we're doing a formation of contract subject. The format of the exam is probably more similar to last semester's exam than any other in the past, but you've got a whole heap of past exams in the Topic 12 materials that you can have a look at. Last semester I was able to get permission to give a scenario and a contract in advance, and then there were questions about the scenarios. So you can see, I only put it up last night because to go through lots of rigmarole sometimes to get permission to do things. But anyway, those are actually now available for you to see. You will see that last semester's contract and scenario are way more complex than the scenario you got this time. Because last time I made a really hard exam, really hard exam. And I'm just trying to make it so that it works, so that you guys have got enough, so that everybody who is doing the exam, who has done the work, should be able to pass it, that you'll be able to demonstrate competence. But there's enough scope in there for those of you who've done the extra mile, who are exceptionally clever, or who just want to be awesome your entire lives, can actually shine as well. And that's been the hardest thing with exams in this subject, is to make them easy enough so that people can do them competently, but complex enough so people can shine can be quite difficult. So again, somehow I'm making something that I know is really scary for you about me and how hard it is. I actually get that it's hard, and I'm not expecting any, you know, like, I am fair about it, I hope. I do not see exams as my opportunity to just be mean to you guys. It is my opportunity to work out who has really been able to do the work. I've designed them, I hope, so that you can shine. So then the exam itself, you will get the scenarios that this contract will be relevant to, some questions about those scenarios, and that's basically what you'll be answering. So those things will appear magically on the day. I'm telling you in advance, these are the characters in your exam. There will be Mr. Apu, Lisa, and Nelson. So just in case you just want to know who you'll be dealing with, what kind of pop culture references there will be, that's them. I did get a question last night when I mentioned it. Can you assume that, should you be assuming that Lisa and Nelson are children? That show's been on longer than you've been alive. They're fucking adults, as far as I'm concerned. Unless it says otherwise in the question that they have an age that is under 18, then assume that they are adults, okay? The question will guide you in relation to that. The next thing I want you to point out is there are 4 questions. There are 3 scenario questions, problem questions, and 1 critical analysis question. The 3 scenarios are alternatives, alternates. So each one, you'll start the scenario on the basis that what happened in the previous one is just wiped away. Now, the reason that I mention that is somebody with way more qualifications than me, actually 2 of them, did the moderation for the exam and both of them got confused. Like, even though it says alternative 1, alternative 2, they said, oh, this doesn't make sense because the price in this one is different from the price that's earlier. It's like because the one that's earlier doesn't matter. All right, 3 alternative scenarios. Now, if it turns out somebody has a panic and they forget that, again, I'm not an asshole. So we'll find a way to read it on a way that makes sense. I will pick that up, but they are designed to be 3 standalone questions, okay? By the way, interrupt me if we have questions along the way. Thanks for that, Steve. Okay, so what kind of questions are you likely to get? The scenario questions are likely to ask you to advise someone. The person you advise might be Apu, it might be Lisa, it might be Nelson. It might be some combination of those, but you've got to work out who it is that you are advising. You might be asked to advise what the agreement says in respect to a particular scenario. So again, the best way to really understand what I'm saying here is even if you don't do it as a practice exam, look at last semester's exam, where there was quite a complex scenario and quite a complex agreement. And for example, one of the questions, so that particular one, they got an agreement for the installation of internet services. And there was a question that said, in this case, Dennis Denuto entered into that contract, and he was advised by a cast of characters that had similar names to a British sitcom called the IT Crowd. And so Moss has advised Dennis to do some things, he's paid a bill, and then he's been charged about 2% more. And the question was, why is he charged 2% more? And if you had read the contract, there was a clause in there that says, if you pay by credit card, we can charge you this extra amount. And there was a little bit more in the question that dealt with that. But again, it could just be as simple as that. What does the contract say about something? How does something arise? It might ask you to identify elements or apply classifications that we've dealt with over the course of the semester. So it might ask you, what are the essential terms? Or it might ask you, more likely, a more complex question than that, because we've got a pretty simple contract this time around, just working out whether or not all the essential terms are there when you match it with a scenario, for example. So we might be using that kind of classification language. Other kind of classifications that we've used, we've talked about essential terms, we've talked about warranties, and so essential terms or conditions, warranties and inanimate terms. We have, we've talked about unilateral and bilateral contracts. We've classified things as guarantees or as indemnities. We've done lots of different so classification is a thing that I would think about in your study. Think about the different ways that we've classified things for the purpose of understanding the law better. Questions might also ask you to explain how some specific area of the law applies. So how the common law rules in relation to interpretation of the statutes apply, for example. So Only last week we were talking about limiting clauses. So clauses that limit the operation or seek to limit the operation of the ACL in some way, which we recognise is something that we're not allowed to do. I want to take my jacket off and I didn't have anything to attach my microphone to. It's very complex doing this job, very complex. So you might be looking at that. Is there some sort of carve-out clause, and if so, will it actually work? Range of different things like that. It might also just ask you to make sense of something. So think about the cases that we've had where somebody's gone, for example, to a dry cleaner, and there's been a sign or some information on a ticket, and then there's been some written terms, and then they've said things and done things, and we've got to work out from which different activities do the terms arise. So which express terms are in fact the terms of the contract. When does the writing supersede? Does it supersede? That sort of thing. It might ask you to explore a particular provision of the contract and explain its relevance to either the scenario or the common law. Why would you include this kind of clause in a contract? Kind of the reverse of what you've just been doing. What things might you include that you didn't otherwise include? And there will be a dedicated critical analysis question. So something that has nothing to do with the scenario, which is your opportunity to show me what you think about something that we've done this semester. A really important point is that time is money in this scenario. You have 2 hours. You have 4 questions. This is about as easy as I've ever made the maths. There are 4 questions. Each one is worth 25 marks. Guess what that means? I know this is a bit will do your head in. 30 minutes a question, right? Assume that 25 marks on one question is worth the same as 25 marks on another question. And so try and aim to spend about the same amount of time on each of the questions, if you can. One of the things that, again, I've been in trouble a bit for saying this in previous years, but it seems to me that not all points are equal. That the distance between 49 and 50 is way, way, way smaller than the difference between 79 and 80. Like if you are almost there, like the first, if we're marking something out of 100, 100%, if you are so close to almost there, like actually, like the first 10 points, it pretty much for putting your name on the page and starting the question, right? It's like there's something there to get it over the line. The thing is, if you don't attempt a question, that's 0. So doing one question really, really, really well, where you might get 80, 85% for it, at the end of the day, it's not maths. It's pretty unlikely that I'll be giving anybody 100 for the exam. But if you're doing if you do one question really, really well and you're, say, getting 80% for that, but you do that at the expense of not doing the other question at all, you are likely to do worse than somebody who gets 2 lots of 60, So 2 60s are 120 marks in that over that space, as opposed to just 80 or 85 or even 90. Okay, so make sure you attempt every question. I would also try to organise your time so you plan to spend about 25 minutes on each question, and that will leave you a good 20 minutes for unexpected things. Going back, changing your mind, highlighting some cases, thinking about something else that might go in there. An extra 20 minutes will feel really luxurious. And if you are aiming to do 25 and then it turns out the third question takes you longer than you thought it would, you've still got 25 minutes to do the next one, right? So again, this is about strategy. You have indulged me all year as I tell you stories about what it's like to be a real lawyer and try and actually focus you on being good at the gig when you work. Now, we're going to concentrate on how to make you as good at exams as you can be, so I can give you the best marks that I can possibly give you. Okay, when it comes to actually answering the questions, use IRAC. Now, I know lots of you got feedback on the first assignment and will probably get it again on the second assignment. That is, IRAC can be a bit of a blunt instrument. When we're talking to our clients and really explaining things, it's a great way for planning, but it can be quite unsophisticated when it comes to explaining things to people. In an exam, it is awesome, right? It makes it quick and easy for me to mark. It makes it quick and easy for you to get the information out. It also means, particularly if you leave a bit of white paper, I would suggest an exam is not the place to worry about the environment. Just for 2 hours, write on one side of the page, leave some white space, so you can come back and write some more if you need to, and if you don't, so I can read your handwriting, okay, so I can make sense of it. But basically, leave the space there. These are the issues. Leave a little space if you want to, because you might think of another one while you're doing something else and you can come back and write it in, okay? These are the issues, these are the rules, this is how I think they apply, this is what the conclusion is. Make sure you answer the question. Ideally, answer the question right up front. Think about who you're advising. So, first thing I would say to a poo is he needs to get a proper lawyer rather than rely on me in an exam. No, don't write that, but you know what I mean. Start out with what you think the answer to the question is. If, as you actually think by writing, you change your mind, that's okay. Go and cross it out and write something different at the beginning. Another reason why it says you're supposed to write on both sides of the sheet of paper. Don't. Leave the other side blank. Partly because if I don't pick them all up, I'm planning to, some poor person is going to have to scan them to send them to me overseas to mark, and double-sided scanning in those books is just mean. So just think of it as a favour to that person. But it also means that actually if you need to, you can write an arrow and put something else in there in a legible way, okay? So use IRAC, think about it as a way of structuring it out. For your critical analysis question, what I really care about is what you think, not what you know. Okay, so really try and bring out your opinion and support your opinion with the cases. Just even if you don't have a fully formed opinion, tell me what you think the interesting questions are. Tell me which cases are relevant to this area of the law, and particularly how they're different from each other, or how you find them frustrating, or what you think is wrong, or where it doesn't match up. As long as you're answering the question, the more you tell me what you think, the more original your answer is going to be, the less likely it is that it's a pre-canned something or you're just copying something out of your textbook, and the better your marks are going to be in the long run. You've got to back yourselves here. You guys are smart. Like, you're really smart. This is one of the smartest groups that I have ever worked with. And so back yourselves. If you think something, chances are it's worth thinking. And at least it's demonstrating that you're clever. So, tips on answering exam questions. If it's the law, it's come from somewhere. Try and cite something. Now, at this stage, I don't need you to give me full citations, okay? I need the name of a case. I can live with a name that's not even the full name. So if we're talking about Carlil and carbolic smoke ball, try and be a little bit more ingenious than using that as support for everything. But if you're using Carlil and carbolic smoke ball, I will accept Carlil. I will accept smoke ball. I will know what it is that you're talking about, right? I don't expect you to be writing everything out just for the sake of writing it all out. But I do need you to have a case, okay? As often as you possibly can. You know, if it turns out in your haste you spell homogeneous wrong, it's not going to make a difference, right? Content is more important than form, but just try and make it as legible as you can. Next, really big tip, stick to contract law. Particularly going back to my issue just a minute ago about what you think. Stick to the topic that I can mark you on. So coming in tonight, I was listening to the radio because I am officially an old lady. I listen to 774, and they're talking about some push that's going on at the moment to change the age of capacity for children in relation to committing crimes. So can a child, at the moment there are laws apparently that mean that a 10-year-old can be found to have sufficient capacity to have committed a crime. Now that's really interesting, but it's not relevant to capacity in property, okay? Now I can see if you were having some really, you might want, I might have a question in there about whether capacity continues to be relevant. And you might want to link in an answer to that a reference to, yep, you think that the age is, is too high, that 16-year-olds can enter into contracts and that it's unfair the way it is at the moment. And yes, in passing, you could mention that children as young as 10 can be held responsible for crimes, so why not for debts that they incur? But that's about it, okay? That's about as far as you want to go. I don't want a deep and even thoughtful analysis of the way the criminal law should work with children, because we're talking about contract law. Don't forget your textbook, if you've got a physical textbook with you, has an index. That can be a really quick and easy way to remind yourself what's going on. So if you are thinking about, I know this is something to do with, I'll stick with capacity for the moment. This is something to do with capacity and something to do with loans. Go into the textbook and have a look. See if your two keywords are related in some way. Go back into the textbook. Now, the last time you want to be reading something for the first time is in the exam. I would well and truly advise to make sure that you have as a minimum done the minimum reading, the recommended reading for this course. Now, some of you will not be using the recommended textbook, but as long as you've got a relatively modern Australian text and you have read the chapters on the topics that we have covered and the cases that we've addressed, or at least in overview, you will, even if you're using different cases that aren't in our textbook, that's fine. I can work with that. So it's not a problem. Make it easy for me to see the gold. So I'm matching, you've worked out what the issue is, you've worked out what the law is. For each law you've got a case or a statute or something. Then you've applied that law to the facts or the scenario you've got, and you've come up with an end result. Now, so in my notes that I'm marking against, I've got a list of cases. If you've got those highlighted and I can just quickly cross-reference, you're making it easy for me to give you the marks, okay? Now, I'll look, again, not an asshole, I will definitely look for them, but if you can make it easy for me, why wouldn't you? Bullets are fine, okay? Yes, writing is part of the craft of being a lawyer. But it's never, ever, ever in your life going to happen that you are holed up by somebody needing to give urgent advice on 3 different matters, plus your opinion on something else, without any access to the internet or a brains trust or somebody else to talk to, and only handwritten notes and copies of things that you've pulled out, plus a textbook at your side. That is not authentic. It's never going to happen. So let's say, at best, it's like preparing for a meeting on the fly, and you can make notes, okay? You can arrange them as notes. You can use arrows. If you change the order in your mind as to how you would address things, put big fat numbers next to it and give me some indication that you want me to read the paragraphs in the order that you've written them out, okay? Some of you will have shocking handwriting. Honestly, I didn't believe it could be as bad as it is, but some of you will have really, really, really terrible handwriting. Chances are that it won't be the worst I've ever seen, So far, I have not actually had to call anybody in to read their stuff to me. I can't say in good faith that I haven't sort of brought them out into the living room and asked other people in my family what they think. But at the end of the day, so if you have terrible handwriting, do me a favour, write every second line, okay? Do something to put some space around it so I can see. On the whole, terrible handwriting tends to overlap and get bunched up and stuff like that. So if you just spread it out, that will help. Some of you will write really, really, really tiny. I can deal with that. I can manage that. Some of you will just, yeah. Some of you, though, actually probably will be a little bit... I have really beautiful handwriting. I used to. It's gone downhill a bit. And basically, that used to be my problem, is I'd be trying to make it too nice, too neat. Don't worry about that either, all right? So the person sitting next to you, their handwriting is shit, so you can have shit handwriting too. You will not be outed. Please don't repeat the question in your answer. You don't have time for that, okay? Every minute is worth points, so concentrate on what matters. Don't summarise the facts. You have to give me the exam sheet back, and so I know what the facts are, right? I get to read 70 lots of it. I will well and truly know what the facts are. Some people can be really smart. You have to give your sheet back. So some people will highlight something on the sheet and then sort of make an indication that, you know, this is the bit I'm talking about in the exam, you know, bit A or something like that. If that makes it easy for you, do that, that's fine. As I said before, I really can't stress this enough. It just breaks my heart when people don't do questions, because I cannot find a mark for you. Once I got caught, so I may as well tell the story, but I got an exam back where the entire answer to one of the questions was capital W, stop, capital T, stop, capital F, stop. I actually took a photograph of it and I tweeted it, and with the question, can't I give this person something for being to the point and articulate? Which of course I couldn't do, but of course, yes, that person had told everybody when they left the exam that that's what they had done. So of course, it immediately, somebody had seen it on Twitter, and I was in, well, actually they were quite good about it really, but it was quite funny. So I have learnt my lesson. I will not tweet anybody's exam answers. Although occasionally I really appreciate it. Some people make me laugh out loud with their little bits in the exams. That's quite cool. So just something, anything, okay? Anything is better than nothing. If I can find a mark for you, I will find it, especially in that first 50. Don't make an assumption and not set it out. So for example, if you were to assume, because you haven't listened to me today, in a particular scenario, that Lisa and Nelson are children in primary school, and so you go down one whole way, as long as you articulate that that's what your assumption is, after I make a face and say, who am I, chopped liver, do you not listen to me? Clearly you've articulated the assumption, and I will answer the question based on your assumption. Now, if it's a reasonable assumption to make, which it may well be a reasonable assumption to make, other than, you know, the fact that clearly these events do not happen to real people. I just like using pop culture references for my exams. It amuses me. But if it's a reasonable assumption to make based on the circumstances, then you've got no problem at all. If it's not a particularly useful assumption to make, it will impact my assessment of your ability to assess the issues. But again, once that's dealt with, if you then apply the law the right way, etc., you know, from there we're golden. It's not a domino effect in the sense if you get a little bit wrong early on, if I can find a sensible way to give you marks, I will do that. And this is a bit like saying don't sneeze, don't panic. Like seriously, don't panic. Panicking will not get you anywhere. I was saying to some people just before I started, I did my first exam as an adult. I think there was a more than 25-year gap back in 2012. I went to do my, I was doing my MBA, and I did this fancy live-in MBA at Melbourne Business School, and we did, you know, like you live on campus for a month at a time, you do nothing else but the work that you're doing, and we're all there, we're 2 weeks into it and we get our first lot of exams. You basically do 2 subjects at a time in intensive mode over 2 weeks. It's like, it's in the fire hydrant. And so of course we have the first subject, which is about managing processes, which is about half words and critical analysis and whatever, and the other half is maths. So the night before, my mate there is like, he's really stressed. And so we sit up quite late at night and I just tell him, you know, like, we're all in the same boat, we're all, you know, they wouldn't have let us in if they didn't think we could do it. We've been doing the work, we've had no time to do anything else, we're gonna be golden. Anyway, we turned up the next day to get the exams, and the way it worked, we had, it's like, Melbourne Business School is like a old hotel, and everybody gets Hotel California, you never leave. But everybody has their own room. They literally switch off the internet, you have to hand in your phones, and you go back to your room to do your exam, right? And you sign a piece of paper saying you're not going to cheat, and I think you can't make phone calls, and anyway, that's all fine. And initially I had been told I'd be able to type my exam, and they changed that rule on the day, right? You can't type your exams, you are going to have to handwrite. And that just threw me. Like, I had a plan, I can type. Handwriting, like, that's a whole different thing. It was just, and I just panicked. And I just went in there. And I think if I'd been in an exam hall, I probably would have been okay, because I would have just had to suck it up, put on my big girl pants and just do it. But instead, I'm there in this room by myself going, I literally peed my body weight. Like, I did not, like, 2-hour exam, 50% the maths, 50% the words. So what do? Like any sensible person, not. I think, maths, that's not my strong suit, I'll do that first. Bad call, okay? When you're looking at the questions, you think, I've got no real idea about that one, do that one last, okay? Do it, do something, but put your energy early on, because you will feel better about yourself. So I basically just do the maths really badly. I leave myself 10 minutes to write the 50% of the exam with the words, where I actually had a really strong opinion about something and it was really easy to do. Somehow I got through. I actually got through, which, yeah, I know. Ken's face. No, I got through. And the thing is because, like me, the people who were examining me, they weren't setting me up to fail. They just need the evidence that I knew what I was doing, right? And that's what I need from you. Okay, I didn't do brilliantly. There's no doubt I didn't do brilliantly, but I didn't fail, okay? And really, if you guys don't panic, you go in with a good plan, I know that this is an exam you can do. And if you can't do it, that means that you either haven't put the work in or you have completely panicked, and we'll find a solution, okay? Because you're going in fine. Critical response questions. Kinds of things to expect. These are the hard ones. You will feel like you haven't practiced them. That's because most of you haven't practiced them. You have had discussion board opportunities to practice them, but very few people did them. But have a look at those. In the materials, you will see that there are examples of these kinds of questions. But ultimately, they go to things like, why does the law work the way it does? What are the exceptions to the rule? What do we learn from the exceptions? What are the exceptions trying to teach us? What issues are there with an element of the law? How do cases fit together? How do we contrast cases? Why do we have similar cases with similar facts and different outcomes? And then also, what kind of problem or mischief is the law trying to solve or avoid in a particular circumstance? I think the best way to study for these kind of questions is to do what you've been doing, which is, as you're trying to work out what the law is and how you would approach the questions, is keep on thinking, why? Why do we have a law to do this? Why does it matter whether there's intention? Why do we need consideration? Why would a court not inquire into whether consideration is adequate or not? All of those kind of things. The other hints that you might have, clearly when you see there's enough past exams now to see whether or not there are some patterns in relation to that. Things I probably have mentioned along the way are, you might have noticed in the privity chapter, for example, in your textbook, most of the chapter and most of the casebook materials are about why privity is a bad idea. So that's a really easy one for me to write a question about. I'm not saying I have. I certainly have in the past. But again, think as you're going through your textbook and you're looking at it, think, well, what are they talking about that you might have an opinion about? So what am I looking for specifically in relation to those? Firstly, answer the question. Tell me what you think. The question will be phrased as a question, and so try and answer the question itself. I need to see that you can identify some context, like work out what the topic area is, how it fits together, what cases are relevant to this. That is usually enough to get you the first 50%. Even if you're not actually critically analysing in a 25-minute scenario, the fact that you are able to identify what it is that you think you need to analyse will get you over the line. So then the rest of it is about the gold. What is your point of view? Why do these things matter? Do we need to change the law in some way? What would reform look like? Why would we have it? I think it's a good idea as you're going through the topics to just make yourself a little list of the kind of things that have interested you about the topic. And I know some of the topics are dull, maybe there is nothing, but something that you can draw on for those will help. And if you can demonstrate that you can link your opinion to the case law, or that your opinion is formed out of some synthesis, it's absolutely awesome if you find a judgment you really disagree with and you can articulate why. Really good if you can agree with someone and disagree with somebody else. Okay? And if you can bring it into an Australian context, that is really helpful. Sorry, that is my phone, which is dinging away there, but it is actually offline. Problem-solving questions. I'm looking for you to solve the problem, right? Use IRAC, mentioned that as well. Always, always, always go with the common law, right? Okay, so if you think that the question might be about something else as well, that's fine, but we're looking at common law, we're looking at contract law in Australia. So again, last semester's exam, the question related to getting internet installed. I am not interested in the telecommunications legislation, okay? So if you see something in the document that you've got to have a look at and you think, okay, this relates to, I wrote it so long ago I can't even remember now. It's up who's selling his shop, wants to sell his shop, and it's a franchise. I'm really not in anything other than the most minor terms interested in the franchising code, other than how it directly impacts contract law, okay? So I'm not asking you to go out and learn something new or create new materials in relation to this. Little bit, this is actually unlike, in exams it's unlike when you're writing to a client. Being able to identify many issues, clearly focus on the ones that matter the most, but a little bit about a number of issues will probably, in most cases, will help people get better marks than going really deep on one or two, because people who do that rarely pick the right issues, is the way that it works. I've kept this slide in. We don't really have short answer questions in the way that we used to. You'll see in the earlier iterations of the exam, there were often sort of some warm-up short questions. you know, 2 or 3 line answer ones to sort of get you in there, and then a couple of problems and a critical analysis. But I think it is embedded in the other things that we have. You may find that you're being asked to explain a term or to identify a key point. So it's worth actually just thinking about that. Scenarios too are often inspired by cases. So if you see something and it looks like the names and the situation has been changed, chances are that has happened. So that will help you identify where to focus your attention. I'm going to go through some questions in the quiz that we have a little bit later, but there are plenty of materials in the week 12 that will give you opportunities to just have a go at examples. Another scenario I want to remind you about is along the way, in almost every week, I've put together quizzes for you, or there are exercise questions. Now, the exercise questions don't come with answers, but they're basically like exam questions. The quizzes, they can really help you hone in where you might need to do more work. And there's nothing stopping you going back week by week and having a go at the quizzes. Even if you did them before, you might want to do them again. If they're not helpful to you, don't do them, but they're there for you to have a go. Again, just don't panic. That seems to be the secret to it, and be awesome. Questions, concerns, frustrations? Anybody excited? Really looking forward to it? Okay, I'm going to change slide packs. We'll stop there for a moment.